Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most runaway work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse,
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
and we are coming at you live in the Discord. Pew pew live.
Yeah. A little bit earlier than usual too, which is exciting for
Mm-hmm,
me as the morning person in this duo.
I usually wake up right before we record, so I'm up a bit earlier today.
I usually read the chapters and do my notes before we record.
Mm,
So we're all making progress because I had notes written last night, which was a
well done,
PB.
well done.
Speaking of milestones,
Oh yeah, we
uh,
were just talking about milestones, weren't we?
today's milestone alert is that as of this episode, Pale has now run for a longer amount of time than Ward did. I think we
Congratulations,
crossed it
Pale. Yeah,
on Wednesday, so there's only Twig remaining
yeah.
to before Pale becomes the longest story in both metrics.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess suck it. We've got Ward, and we'll take our throne.
Yeah. We've now also run for longer than we've got Ward, which I don't was not something anybody expected. I don't think.
No, um, but yeah, let's get into it, shall we? Our chapters today are 2110 and 2111. Starting with 2110, Verona gives Clem a call to gather info on things that might be useful against old Charlie, but does not make much headway.
No. And I mean, yeah. I, this chat with Clem is like a lot. There's a lot to it, but I keep getting excited. She mentions that she is now like officially sort of the fixer for Sergeant Hall. Like she's the new
Mm,
Ted. And it's all just primo Plex material, and I'm kind of like,
mm.
I want more of this, but also I guess not in Pale because I do want Plex. It's very confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it would be a fun story. Clem is still very eager to learn more about magic, and Verona does not give in. But it was interesting when I was rereading this, it did occur to me that they're effectively starting a kind of, Magic 101 school at the Garrick HQ right now, right? So, I mean, it wouldn't be that difficult to make a spot there for Clem if they really wanted to. It's different when it's Avery's family. Avery kind of is already responsible for them, but yeah, I mean, maybe that's the way for Clem to learn about magic is to go to the Garrick 101 Intro to Magic course that they're starting to set up.
Yeah, I mean, you're interesting because this jump, what you're saying is interesting because it jumped out to me too that it's like I don't know that we have a really solid image from the Kenneteers on as to like what their policy is around awarification
Yeah.
or like awakening. And I'm not really criticizing that. There's been a lot going on, and it's like a complicated issue. I mean, the whole point of this book is blanket rules of shit. Stop doing that. But like yeah, like it does feel like a topic that the Kenneteers do kind of not really have any cohesive general policies on. Like I fail to see how it wouldn't be better to awaken Clem.
Mm, mm.
And I think the story has sort of addressed it, and I don't know, but like yeah, like because we've seen like how they've treated like Melissa and Avery's siblings, as you brought up, and like Clem, like and there's like the witch hunters too. It's just something where it's been around the Kenneteers, but it's like one of the issues I don't think they've ever really sat down and thought like this is how we feel about this, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, you're right. I think that they made a call back in the Bristow showdown that made a lot more sense. Um, and their world has pretty fundamentally changed. I don't think they have the
Yeah,
time to worry about it right now, but it does feel like the kind of thing they should, they should they should revisit, I suppose, when they have a chance.
yeah. And I guess I'm just thinking not just for Clem though, like as a broader thing. I'm like I wonder like
Mm,
what is their general policy on the concept of innocence and all that? Like it's a
yeah,
topic they haven't really addressed
yeah,
because they haven't had to. But
yep,
yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it's a good call. Verona does pretty well in uh, this a subject that I think she's not normally that good at, which is recognizing that other people process their traumas differently to her, and her way of leaning into the magical impacts of traumas is not the way that Clem necessarily feels about the horrifying things that have happened in her life.
yeah, I think considering especially how limited their interactions have been in the past, like I don't think Clem and Verona have really interacted all that
Mm,
much. So
mm,
like, and Clem is one of those people where the landscape is just absolutely cluttered with trauma landmines. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty hard not to hit one. Um, so yeah, I thought she did. I thought she did all right. I mean, this is kind of a chapter of Verona largely wearing her Avery hat, and I thought as an
Yes.
opener, she did pretty well here.
Yeah, I think the one thing that she really kind of puts her foot in is revealing to Clem more of the information about how her dad died and how it was kind of just like a whim of the universe to get her dad murdered, which is pretty rough. But yeah,
Yeah. The framing of like, this is just, bookkeeping kind of the lazy, easy way to do it was a bit like a harsh delivery for somebody whose life has been ruined many times over by it.
yeah,
But I don't like not necessarily in the back. Like I really agreed with Verona's assessment here of like because Avery freaks out, and obviously we'll talk about Avery and her whole deal later on. But like I
mm.
kind of agreed with Verona's assessment where it's like, look, it could have been better, but like it wasn't
Yeah, but
bad.
it also could have been much worse.
Yeah. Um, I also like Clem just starts sort of listing off other items because Verona's being vague and just sort of asking about the year. But
Mm.
Clem just starts like listing off other items that she had, and like we get these great details on she talks about some things we've heard about before, but there's a handful of new items that we get all the details on and the story behind. And I think I'm choosing to headcanon that Walbo didn't mean for that to happen. It's just like it just every time Clem comes up, he just sort of accidentally writes little short stories about these items she's found because it's just like such fertile ground.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It is very fun always to hear about these items that have played a part in Clem's life.
Yeah, yeah. And I, I really uh, like. I guess speaking of Walbo writing for Clem, I enjoyed the little bit where Clem was like, "What if we're just in a virtual reality simulation?" And I'm kind of like Neo, like I'm like a glitch in the system,
Yeah.
which is actually like a pretty good analogy, actually. But I was like, well,
Mm.
really, the truth is even worse. Walbo just made you up, and he's doing this to you.
Yeah. Warpo is the villain that is inflicting this pain on you, Clem. Rebel, rebel. Yeah, no. I thought it was great. There's this moment where Clem kind of realizes that, for all the horrible impacts that her life has had from her gilded liliness, she still is like, well, I don't want this to happen to anyone else who's like not
Yeah,
equipped to deal with it. Like, she's kind of willing to bite that bullet, and it's really heroic of her, I suppose.
yeah. I think the theme for all of the items that find her is meant to be that they're kind of tests of character. Um, and so this is like her depressing sort of meta test of characters. It's like I can see the logic for like, it's unfair for her to have to continue to shoulder this burden, but it's arguably even more unfair to foist it onto someone else.
Mm,
um while she's found some sort of stability within it.
mm.
Like she's with Corey now, so yeah, it's such a mess, but yeah, like she's such a good person.
Yeah. The fact that she's not willing to give Verona more info on some of these items that she deems too hot to handle as well is a pretty good mark
Yeah,
in her favor.
I mean, especially because she's right, Verona is trying to source an item to use to create an absolutely fucking mess that will distract the Carmine. Like,
Yeah, she is trying to use it for a dangerous purpose explicitly. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
well done, Clem. Well read.
I think Verona doesn't even really try to argue it. Clem's like, I'm a bit worried that you're asking about that sort of thing," and Verona's like, "Yeah, fair enough." And it's like, well, yeah, it is. Like, you're explicitly trying to get the most dangerous thing you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
Um, I also thought, like, going back a bit to that conversation they have about, the forces and balancing things. This is something that has been explored in the story before. Like, especially what jumped out to me is I feel like the most we've heard about the idea that there are these forces that need to balance things out and iron out the wrinkles was Ryan's interlude, like
Mm,
19.z, where he became the
mm,
Aurum, because
yeah.
he was very specifically creating those wrinkles and running away from the consequences.
Yeah.
Um, and so I thought, it seems really interesting to me that Verona is really thinking about that sort of stuff as we're getting ready to fight the Aurum and maybe the Sable too later on. But it's like, because I guess like the judges are the sorts of forces they're talking about to a large degree, or if not directly, the judges are the ones sort of responsible for the forces that would create these sort of objects to balance out vibes, right? Like,
Mm.
if not enough people are dying,
Mm,
and so some kind of incarnate force has to create a knife that kills people to increase the amount of dying energy. It's presumably like the judges and stuff who are kind of like setting the quota of
yeah,
dying that needs to
yeah,
happen.
you would think.
Which is also because this was the thing that jumped out to me is it's like, oh, if not enough people are getting sick, an item will be created that makes people sick. And my first thought was, well, why are
Why?
we fixing this? Oh, not enough people are getting sick. Oh, dang! Like,
Yeah.
so it's like somebody or something is setting this sort of quota, and I feel like it's tied into the judges, and so it comes into this whole thing of like maybe like these wrinkles have to be artificial to some degree, like
Mm,
deeply rooted, so it's maybe not just like changeable or something, but
yeah.
like all this vibe of yeah, talking about these forces is intimately tied into the judges, so it makes sense that Verona's thinking about it a lot.
The way I'm thinking about it is kind of like, let's say there's a spirit of pestilence in, Eastern Canada. Um,
Yeah,
and it feels that its power is starting to dwindle, so it might make an item to like get some more pestilence going and hopefully kind of kickstart that process. But that's kind of it spending its energy to as an investment, and if that
sure.
consistently fails over a long enough period of time, you know, then then it will kind of balance out eventually. But it's going to kind of fight to stay static, at least in some way.
Yeah, but why are we letting it? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
Like,
sure, sure,
like
sure. I mean,
you know, I, I know Pal's
practitioners.
been teaching us not to just like hate on others and all that sort of stuff, but also if you're a
Mm,
spirit of pestilence, like you find a niche that we can accept, or like get alabasted, right?
yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Um, yeah, the trio regroup, and Verona keeps running through some ideas for her big distraction of Charles. She hasn't got it yet, but she kind of is workshopping it.
Yeah, and yeah, because this is as we sort of touched on before, this is a Verona chapter where Verona is kind of wearing her Avery hat for most of it, but this is
Yeah.
the very Verona-y part, and I really like how Wildbow is kind of able to make this. I think I think it must be very hard to have like character sits and brainstorms as an interesting segment of a chapter. Like
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess we don't get the actual brainstorming part. It's the skipping ahead to when she's got an idea and she's explaining it, I suppose.
but there's a chunk here where she really is just like
You're
bouncing
right.
off
Yeah,
ideas
true.
of Sheridan, off Sheridan. So you're right. Like we
Yeah.
do miss most of it because like Wildbow's not a complete sadist, but or masochist, the one where you do pain to yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know. I think this is like it's just one of those little things Pale has always done that I feel is so important, and that like other stories can't ever afford to do, which is just giving us a snippet of the bit where Verona just sits here and like thinks about shit.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's well written to keep this interesting, playing into kind of character dynamics.
Yeah.
Something that I like about this is while Verona's trying to kind of get her space to think, there is pure chaos going on around her with Avery and Lucy, like bouncing in and out. And there's a moment after she's done her brainstorming where she realizes like Avery has come and gone twice, and there's just been pure chaos in the background while she's been zoned out. It's really a fun vibe.
Yeah, it does remind me of like working all nighters at uni or like at the workplace where we met. Like that sort of just like yeah, like chaotic, but also kind of fun chaotic. Like for a second, I was almost like, oh, I miss being able to do stuff like this, and then I really thought about it, and I was like, no, you always feel like shit afterwards.
Mm,
But there's something fun about that chaos of just like everyone's so busy and everyone's got so much to do that it's just like like fun chaos. You know, it
mm.
is kind of funny that Avery's freaking out this environment because it kind of sounds like her house on steroids from the start of the story.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, for sure. But more wholesome, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she's
Yeah.
not she's not disappearing into the crowd anymore. Um, I guess another thing to talk about, like admiring Wildbow's writing ability in this segment, would be like the variety to that he's able to add here. And like I remember we used to talk about this years ago in like Deep Impact about how every
Mm,
fight felt unique and that sort of thing. And like
mm,
what I'm loving here is we are moving through the judges sort of one by one, but this one feels incredibly distinct and unique to the
mm,
Alabaster one, not just in
mm,
the plan, but in the planning. Like the Alabaster, we kind of sat down, had a moral argument, you know, talked over the plan, and then went and did it. Whereas this one is this chaotic. all-nighter scramble. Like, it just feels like a completely different thing, and that really, like, doesn't that really, I don't know, blunts the sort of, like, 1, 2, 3 nature of these challenges that each one
Yeah,
really
yeah,
feels unique.
they do. They feel very different in a very captivating way, don't they?
Yeah,
Um,
and I also think it's fun. So far, both of them have kind of reflected the judge they're against. Like the
mm,
Alabaster one was, we all sat down and discussed the morality of what we're going to do, which it sort of feels like
mm,
that's what an Alabaster should be. And then this one is a crazy networking business all nighter clusterfuck, which is also very Aurum vibes of just, like this reminded me of the workplace in California. Like, it was very businessy, crazy, overworked to me. Like, this is what Twitter
yeah.
looks like right now. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, like I just think it's fun as well that not only has Wildbow found that way to sort of make each one unique, but I think maybe intentionally is mirroring each one a little bit on the judge, which is fun.
Yeah, I like that thought. I think that's a really cool thought. Um, hey, speaking of being all business, we find out that the Garricks run a little small business, find a convenience store, which is just such a fun idea. Like, I want to just spend my days working at this convenience store, chatting to the customers about their adventures. I think that sounds so fun.
Yeah, what a great place to be in customer service, because it gets about,
Mm,
oh, how was your adventure to the fucking whatever the fuck today? Like,
yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, between this and Verona's kind of, unused bookstore, I guess, the the vibe of kind of semi-mundane small businesses in the magical world is so much fun.
Yeah, and you're right. I find it so much more interesting than like pure magic shops. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, sure, you're an alchemy store or whatever, but things
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
Clem's magical knickknacks, like that's fun. But I love the idea of like, yeah, this is where the magicians get their like maps and
And
special
rope and
protein bars.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. It's very good. So yeah, Verona ends up revealing the distraction she's come up with for Charles, which is the sword moot, and ropes in Lucy to help with recruitment. First stop, the Oni practitioners. And I love the way that we lead into the Oni practitioner segment is Lucy says, "Oh, who are we going to first?" And Verona says, "Well, our best negotiation tactic with these guys might be a low cut top," which is just very funny.
Yeah, I think this is why it was great to choose Verona as the POV for the like everything's dialed up to 11, everything's crazy, everyone's panicking chapter, because her response to that is to just kind of double down on being like an annoying dipshit,
Yeah,
um, which is very fun.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, like this is the sort of person I love to be around in that sort of like crazy situation, because I reckon it is calming to have someone just like joking around like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Even though you can tell Lucy was probably about ready to stab her.
Yeah, for sure. And should we also, I mean, like, we should talk about how great the sword mood is
It's so
as
good.
an idea, right? Because it's so, like, Verona sits down and thinks, what do I want to do? I want to distract Charles, I want to rescue McCauleigh, and I want to give Lucy a task. And comes up with, like, the perfect idea for all three of those things. It's so spectacular.
Yeah, it's like a whole flock of birds with one stone. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, it's really, really smart.
I love. I think like, and again, this is that thing. Like, I love that Wildbow sort of turned this brainstorming session into like interesting prose, because I love the pivot where she goes up and like changes distraction for the Carmine to Chuck. Like, she takes it into this really personal angle of, she's like, okay, I'm pivoting to my more personal goals. Hey, speaking of, I don't really have to distract a Carmine. I'm very specifically trying to distract Chuck, and I can fuck with him easy. Like, we know him as a person. That's yeah. You're right. Like, this is it's so good. It's so big brain. Like, I'm impressed by both Verona and Wildbow for sort of hitting this, because I think like last week we tried to sort of talk about it and I was like, I don't know, something about fighting practitioners, but like not even close to where Verona got to.
Mm, yeah.
I
Yeah.
also, sorry, I like it as well because in the Alabaster one again, it was like the Alabaster trial was very big and important. Then Percy was like our fun little side thing.
Mm.
I'm still convinced that the Aurum won't necessarily need to be taken out in the same way the Alabaster was. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm still clinging to that very end of like Ryan's interlude where he sort of made a decision upon seeing how the Kenneteers behaved.
Yeah, and kind of on a metatextual level, like we haven't spent time thinking about how the Kennedy are actually going to win, right? Like Avery's got her army, I suppose, but that's all
Yeah,
we really know about. Like we don't know
yeah.
what the army has even been told they need to do in this situation.
The side of what the Aurum challenge actually looks like is still incredibly vague on our end.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think metatextually, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe that's because I don't know that they're going to need to defeat the Aurum in this way because we've been inside Ryan's head, and I think there's somewhat decent odds
Yeah.
that he will. But like you know, he's the Aurum, right? It's going to be a business negotiate.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
guess. Is it's like he's not just going to go with them. It's like he's the Aurum. It's got to be a business negotiation. I think that would be a fun
Yes.
angle.
And
But
then the sword moot is the actual kind of chunk of
yeah,
focus that we're going to need to pay.
but yeah, I guess that's what I think is so fun about this. Is it's sort of like like Percy was the little distraction, and it was fun to cut to him for comedy. But the
Mm,
alabaster was the main thing. Whereas here, it's like, okay, if the Aurum does sort of turn into a business negotiation, that's fine. But like, you'd be pretty disappointed if we spent 3 chapters of build up just to kind of not do the plan and have the Aurum do a business
yes.
deal, which they accept. So I love that, like, by shooting for the moon, Verona has created a thing where it's like, okay, now the moot has its own stakes, regardless of what happens with the Aurum. We're all
Yes.
super invested in how the moot goes. So it's kind of like
Yes.
the Aurum stuff can kind of be a bit of a like, stroll through the park, you know, not as hype because the moot has just like run away with all of our dreams.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. I'm really eager to see the moot, you know? Like I think it's just a really cool idea and it's gonna be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm because there's no way Charles isn't what like I'm remembering at the start of the arc, one of the things
Mm,
the Kenneteers said to themselves was, "Oh, we didn't think enough about what Charles was doing. Like
mm,
we had our own plans, but we failed to account for his action." Which is, that's like me playing chess 101. I get so caught up in what I'm doing, I completely miss that I'm getting checkmated.
mm,
And I feel like we maybe are doing that again. Well, like, we've heard a lot about Charles's new army and Maricica's, godlings and whatever, but like there hasn't really been much thought to accommodating what Charles brings to the moot.
mm.
So that's also what I'm excited about. There's so much to be excited for at this moot, but I'm also just sitting here thinking, I don't think the Kenneteers have really thought about like Charles will have been prepping something to hit them back. And so that's either coming during this moot or will take place at the moot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we know that the Negatiers are like heading to the moot as well. So I see
Yeah.
the Negatiers as like Charles's agents in the moot, I suppose, but we'll have to see.
Sure, but he must have been cooking up something else, right? Like he wouldn't have been sitting on his thumbs
Well, yeah, I
not
mean, they
preparing a strike against the Kenneteers. And it's like if they've got him distracted and they've got their own other thing, if he's got some strike against them, that seems like the perfect time for him to deploy it too. So I could see like the Moot
mm,
and the Aurum thing ending. They get like good results they want in both of those, and they turn around and like I don't know, Jasmine and Connor are dead or something. It won't be that, but you know what
well,
I mean?
yeah.
Like,
Like Mursica's army to me feels like the thing that they haven't dealt with, and maybe that's where Avery's
yes,
army comes in. I don't know.
no, Maricica's army could be the thing where, yeah, like we come out of the Aurum and the Carmine Moots and we find out Ottawa's gone or some shit,
Mm,
like he's just taken Ottawa or something like that.
yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
But
would
it
have said Kennet Found would get taken, but now that the Moot's fucking
now
in
that the
Kennet
moot's here,
Found, I
probably
assume we'd
not. Yeah.
notice.
Um, so yeah, the gang, and by the gang I mean Verona and Lucy, visit practitioners, getting more and more folks on board, including the Fergusons and the Sonjates.
Now, you said the gang and only listed 2 people, but you've
Yeah,
forgotten about Substitute Avery,
sure, sure.
which I
Substitute
mostly bring up
Avery, yeah.
because I feel like for about 2 years now, I've been jokingly calling Jude the male equivalent of Avery,
Mm,
and now he's just literally subbing in as a male equivalent for Avery. Like it's he just continues to be Avery light.
mm. Yeah. That is a funny thought. I like that he's been subbing in. Early, very, very early hints of a potential ship forming on the horizon between Lucy and Jude as well.
I don't see that
You
at
don't
all.
ship it?
No,
Uh,
don't get me wrong. I'm fully on board with Verona shit stirring
yes,
on that
yes.
topic because that is hilarious. But like, no, like, I don't know. I'm still. I can't remember who it was in that discussion question. I think it was I'm easily impressed who pitched like Jude and Luna hair, and I still kind of back that one. But that anyway.
Mm, yeah, fair enough.
Um, yeah, no, I don't know. Oh, I do like Jude brings up the whole thing of just like how his ego kind of takes a beating every time he hangs out with the Kenneteers, and so I do sort of want to see him succeed somewhere because he is a good guy.
Mm, yeah, he's fun. You want him to have his good moments, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's earned it. Um,
Yeah.
I also, again, from a metatextual perspective, love the idea of this framing of we start with the weakest and work our way up because
Mm,
it's again like Walbo always manages to do this. It makes sense in story because that lets them build the momentum and kind of makes it easier to talk the big people into having to come. But also it works out of story because it means they get like progressively more hype.
mm, yeah,
Like
yeah.
so, yeah.
It builds
Like
up
what?
to a
So,
finale quite naturally, which is,
yeah.
Henniger's. We'll get to them, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah, once again, Walbo's found a way to make it work in universe and for us as readers.
Yeah, and of course we start with the shittiest and smallest of the list.
I love the Oni boys. I mean, for
Yeah.
anyone listening who has watched Unsleeping City 2, like Cody is the best character in Dimension 20 ever, and the Oni boys are very much Cody energy. Like
Mm,
just the goofiest, like fucking hot topic lurking teenage boys. And everything about just the comedy of how lame they are. Like Verona
yeah.
enjoying Mike dying inside when he realizes Jude is not Avery and is not a girl was fucking hilarious.
It was good. The I think if they weren't so incelly, I'd be really all for them.
But they're like, I see they've got that vibe. I don't think they're like full incels. They're like the kind of guys who
Mm,
could totally
mm.
turn into toxic incels, but
Yes.
they're just kind of like shit cells right now. Like they're
Yeah,
just
sure, sure.
like they're not actively terrible. They're just a bit stupid. Like I love the bit where they start talking about the hot girl totems, and after saying they probably won't go to the moot, and Lucy's like, "Well, you actually ever going and like seeing girls?"
Mm.
And they're like, "Well, no, we play video
They
games.
come
We have
to us, yeah.
the hot girl totems." And Lucy just like, and of course it's Lucy has to say this. She's like, "Guys, whether it's about the moot or like just the rest of life, you got to fucking show up, guys." Like, and I feel like that pretty much perfectly sums up their vibe of it's like they're not like toxic yet, but they're gonna turn out that way if they don't fucking start trying. And I do like how the hot girl totems do keep attracting hot girls, but because of who they are, it's not for the right reasons. Like they got robbed by a hot girl. It's fucking hilarious.
Mm. Yeah, it is very funny how this has happened. Um, we see the Palese family, who I think seem really cool as well.
Yeah,
This like they're kind of what were they called? Male Valkyries, um,
Valcalas.
Valkallas. Yeah, I feel like kind of psychopomp guiding the dead stuff is probably a pretty ethical practice. You would hope. So they seem cool.
I mean, I assume the ethics of psychopomping mostly kind of depend on where you're getting your clientele from, right? Like, if you're creating your own clientele to psychopomp, that's probably
Mm,
not great.
mm,
But
true.
yeah. I mean, what's funny is this story keeps talking about how there are psychopomps, but nobody's asking the question that I feel naturally follows from that,
Yeah.
which is,
What
wait,
about
afterlives?
heaven? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, what are we doing with afterlives? And I mean, like this is the other verse. So I imagine, like we've seen how much this world, it's like what people believe and think sort of becomes reality. And we've seen that there's the psychopomps associated with different religions. So I'm kind of like
Mm,
imagining this is one of those universes where there's like a Greek afterlife that's probably pretty empty these days,
mm,
and like each sort of religion maybe kind of has a sort, but like, yeah, I know why the story doesn't want to go there, but fuck, that'd be fascinating to learn more about.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, it would be. I have a theory that I've been working on, Elliot, but it's not cooked enough, I think, to for me to be confident in it.
Okay,
But relates to where heaven sits and hell, but where afterlives sit, I suppose I would say, in the order of the uh other verse. But I'm still
yeah, okay.
cooking it up. But it's interesting. I don't know.
Well, this is the oven.
All right, all right, all right.
Prefer to bring it.
So the key thing that jumped out to me is like if you kind of lose your connections from the world, you the places that it seems like you can go are the abyss or
Yep.
the paths, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so to me, I've started setting up this idea in my head of like the abyss used to be thought of as hell, which I don't think we think is correct, but like maybe is like a step towards hell or like on the path to hell, in the same way of like the Egyptian idea of the afterlife is kind of there's a
Right.
transitional spot, right? And so then perhaps the paths are the kind of equivalent version for a non horrible afterlife, like not necessarily heaven, but more of a at rest kind of thing, right?
Sure. But then
Is my high level thought.
yeah, and I mean that makes sense. Like, this comes back to some of the Pisces stuff we were talking about in DMs like earlier this
Mm,
week. But the idea, yeah, like I guess if everyone's if full death is yeah, I guess getting yoted fully out into the paths or whatever, and then I guess you get kind of recycled. But then what are the
beyond the
psychopomps?
paths.
Yeah, but then what are all the psychopomps? Surely you wouldn't need people. I guess I don't know. Maybe
Well, yeah, I
maybe
mean,
they're like cleanup crews.
yeah, like taking people who haven't gone on the correct way, like to the afterlife and shepherding them correctly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't quite sit right to me yet. There's still pieces that don't quite fit into it.
yeah.
But
A- At the risk of reminding everyone how terrible my taste is, I really always liked how in Supernatural
mm, mm, mm,
the they presented the idea that the afterlives were essentially just I don't know, big batteries and stuff. So it was kind of like
mm,
it was a war between heaven and hell to get souls because souls were sort of like power resources. So like when the afterlives were warring, you could kind of use all the souls in there as like power stuff. And that was like always what I thought was a really cool idea that was wasted in that trash show.
mm,
Um, and I don't, like, it doesn't really feel right for the other verse or something, but like that could be something like I could kind of see if you're like a god and people are praying to you or whatever, and that like so if you're a I don't know a person who follows Zeus or whatever, and then you die, it's like the psychopomp's job to kind of take whatever energy remains and kind of give it to Zeus, and that's like why gods are so interested in
mm,
having worshippers, not just for the like power they get from human belief or whatever, but also like maybe they get to tax your soul after you die and
mm,
take a bit of
mm,
power from it.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Anyway,
We'll figure it
sorry.
out one day.
I mean, maybe that's like maybe there aren't really afterlives. It's just like the psychopomp's job is to kind of like divide you up. So it's like if you die in a
mm,
war, it's like the
mm.
psychopomp's job to be like, okay, well, I
Yeah, give a
mean,
bit of it to the dogs of war. Give a bit of it to the whatever.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Like they're just kind of like the person who does a will execution basically,
Mm,
but less a will of you and like just more the universe. Some sort of estate manager. Anyway, but yeah, no, I guess getting back to the story, um, I love the Palazzi family as well as kind of one of these early examples because it is really a great one for that like Verona wearing her Avery hat thing because this is a family that seemingly has only really made the cut because Verona remembered how much this lesson impacted her, and like we got a
yeah,
whole extra material from this lesson.
yeah.
And like that goes both ways because Mr. Palazzi is like, oh, I remember you. You were like asking like the right questions. Like she also made an impression on him. So it's like I don't know. As much as networking is always going to be sort of Avery's primary playground, this is one of those chapters where we do get to get that reminder, and Verona gets the reminder too that like she's not bad at this. It's not her forte. It's not what she loves doing. But there are a bunch of people out here who remember her and who she's made connections with.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Palazzi senior kind of remembers her and remembers her asking good questions and stuff. Like
Yeah.
you're right. She's left an impression that they're kind of cashing in on here a bit.
Yeah, and as we're seeing Verona sort of step in to help with the Avery role because that's what's needed right now. I guess it's good to get that reminder of like how she,
Mm,
she got shit for that call with Clem, but I think as we both said, like she's not bad. Like she's just she's just because you're not Avery good at networking doesn't mean you can't do it.
mm, yeah.
Also, I love how of course, Verona wearing the Avery hat and doing the rounds of everyone takes the form of this like tour of all the various flavors of shit practitioner family dynamics.
Mm,
Like obviously we start with the Oni boys who have kind of got a shit version of her domain. Like they've got their own house and they're just completely squandering it, unlike what she's done with her domain. obviously the Palazes are kind of fine, but like Mr. Palazzi's putting like a lot of pressure on his son. We'll get to Mrs. Ferguson, and then it sort of all culminates with Mr. Henniger. Like, and it's just like, oh, I see. Like, of course, the Verona chapter of meeting everyone is the chapter of like, let's go explore all the different kinds of shitty parents in this world. Like, a great
Yeah.
reminder of why this fucking moot is necessary is seeing from Verona's eyes all the shitty parents that need to be stopped.
Mm. Yeah. Speaking of, I mean, Mrs. Ferguson is so much fun, right? Like her vibe is so interesting here because she's at the same time like this horrifying kind of helicopter parent that is the worst, but also clearly like a very good practitioner, like very competent and is giving helpful and useful advice to
Yeah, yeah,
Verona.
that's the best part, and like this is like Walbo's so cruel because you can't just write her off because like she starts the stuff she talks about with like why he keeps Marissa around and stuff. It's like that's really good insight. She's good at this. like Mrs. Ferguson, I think you're a better practitioner than you are a mother. I'm just going to put that out there.
Mm.
But yeah, like she, and, there's that bit where she's like, "Oh, I see you're following in my footsteps," and Verona's like, "Kill me." But like it kind of seems like to a certain degree they almost I could see a 13-year-old Mrs. Ferguson actually getting on with the Kennedys quite well.
Mm.
I she's insufferable, but like only because of only certain parts of her are. Yeah, sorry, Walbo raises a great point in the chat. I mean, Derosha seems friendly with her, so that's a pretty solid endorsement.
Yeah, it's really she's actually really interesting, isn't she? And also it comes up that like who was it? Somebody that, Miss Ferguson was involved in the attack on Thunder Bay, right? And fought
Yeah.
against the gang. And is just like so friendly to them here. Like she's such a chill practitioner in that vibe as well of like, yeah, we're all good now because you maybe will date my son.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if Soul's not around, I think she would, or if she's not allowed to talk about Soul, she's like a really competent, good person. It's just like Soul is just this fucking huge. I don't know, like just hole she keeps digging for herself and for Soul.
Yeah.
Like I love the little chat they have with Soul here, where he just like he's so insecure and he's like, I know you're gonna laugh at me because he's bringing up Raquel, who he clearly still has a thing for. But it's like he just assumes they're gonna laugh at him. Like Avery just has to fucking interrupt him, and be like, dude, we think you seem all right. Your mom's crazy. Just we're not gonna laugh at you. Just relax. And it's like honestly, I want them to hang out with him. He seems like a cool dude as well. We just need to get him the fuck away from his mum.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it seems like it's happening. I mean, like
Yeah.
he's he's making his own way a bit, which is good.
Yeah, I did like how Verona's just like, dude, you're overdue a rebellion. Like, just
Yeah.
like I guess that's the thing. It seems like Sol and his mom are both like 10 out of 10s, except when they're together, and then they're both 0 out of 10s. We just need to get them away from each other.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. They have a kind of a toxic dynamic. Okay. So yeah, we of course go to the Sonjetés, which means it's time for Eastern, and of course, the only thing that we as the audience ever think about whenever Eastern comes up is the exact same thing that Verona thinks about, which is fanatical devotion to sucking off Massa.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that Verona remembers that line as fondly as we do because
Yeah.
it's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
I think what really sold this bit though to me is Easton summons those like archetypal spiritual night things he has.
Mm.
And Verona takes a look at them in her sight and thinks, oh, with a quick glance in my sight, those are pretty well made. And that line jumped out to me because I remembered it and I went and found it. And the exact quote in Easton's interlude, 17.x, is he pulls out the knights and he says, he knew that the people with an eye for quality would respect what he'd put together.
Mm.
So I get like what's fun about Easton is there's a competent kid in here. Like
Yeah.
like he and Verona have just kind of agreed on the fact that actually he is kind of good at what he does. It's like he just needs to get out of his own fucking way. And I mean, I guess that's the summary of all the people that we're talking to in this chapter. Is it's like, hey, there's something here. You just need to like not do this.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Again, he's close, isn't he? He just needs to not be such a fuck.
But he's yeah. It's
I
so
do.
funny when he is being like he's just a dick. Like he's just such an idiot.
Um, I like that as a punishment for how much of a piece of shit he is, his dad makes him carry around a big stone. Like it's such a biblical vibes punishment. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, and it's a great little warm up for what we're about to see that Grayson has done to McCauleigh too. Like it's just this is
Yeah,
the
you're right.
discount version of that.
The parents
Um,
get worse and worse over the course of the chapter.
but yeah, because you're right, it's such a shit. Like carry a rock around. Like oh yeah, that'll hurt him. Like I'd almost have more respect for like a spanking or something. Like it's such a shit punishment.
Mm.
Like, yeah. So before we do get to the Hennigers, we skipped over. I want to call it. They stopped by Montreal too.
Oh yes.
And I recognize some of the names from Mile End, so that was a fun little Easter egg for
Yeah.
Mile End for us.
Good stuff. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Bo. But yeah, so this chapter all kind of builds up to the culmination of Verona going to see Grace and Henniger, and in exchange for letting him attend the moot, she demands McCauleigh.
Yeah, basically this entire trip around all the practitioner families has all been the lead up to culminate in Verona yelling at a shitty dad for the way he's emotionally ruining his daughter.
Mm,
It makes sense when you think about it.
yep. I really love this badass line that Verona drops, which is, "Look at what we're doing against the Carmine. Look at what we did with Mussa. Do you really want to be next in line after we're done?" It's such a fucking terrifying line by Verona. It's Grayson does not seem to respect the sheer power of this line.
I got to admit, I kind of love Grayson as a villain because whenever they
Yeah.
start to swing their big dicks around, he's just like, fucking bring
Hell
it.
yeah,
And I,
yeah,
I
I'm
do
so
love that
keen.
energy.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you got to love a villain who's just like, oh, we fighting? I'm
yeah,
fucking down for that. Yeah. Um, that line you called out from Verona, I remember she had a very similar one. I think when they were going up against Massa, where it was like she talked about the principles. Because I think you called it out for the same thing, where she's like, look at what we did to Alexander and Bristow. Are you really sure you want to be next?"
yep.
And look how
And
that worked
he
out for him.
shouldn't. He should have listened, as Grayson should have, and I guess Grayson did. So well done.
Yeah, I mean Grayson kind of, he manages to not say he's doing it, but he gives them what they want. Like they win. If
Mm,
if we want to view this interaction as a competition,
mm,
the Kenneteers do win.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I also just I do really enjoy Verona's energy of like he's like, oh, this is your negotiation technique. She's like, no, we've been really nice to everyone else. Very specifically, fuck you. Like we saved you for last because fuck everything you're about. I don't know. I did really enjoy that energy of just like, oh, I want you to be clear that this is extremely personal.
Mm, yeah, yeah. It's good.
Sorry, before we leave that section, I've got to quit. The final line
Yes,
from this
yes,
section, like the bit where Verona's narration just taps out, is when Grayson sort of is talking about McCauleigh and sort of is like, "Yes, we coddled her too
yeah.
much."
Oh yeah, that was the problem, mate. That was the
Yeah,
problem.
uh,
Yeah,
you know,
it's such a good final line for him to have in this section.
there's too much molly coddling going on in these practitioner
Yeah,
families.
yeah,
We need to
hilarious.
put an end to it.
So yeah, they go and they rescue McCauleigh from her battle world arena child prison, I guess. And McCauleigh, yes, decides to go with them.
So okay, this slave worker camp thing
Yep, yep,
exists.
yep.
And it costs $10,000. Wait.
Yeah, I know. What a
This is
ripoff.
this is what I love about this place. Is like, are all the rest of these people sort of indentured or captured slaves or whatever? And like Grayson is paying to kind of punish her by putting her in here. Or is this a camp full of people where everyone else is paying 10 grand a month or whatever to send people? Like, it's crazy to me that there'd be enough people paying 10 grand a month to
To
send
do
people to
this.
suffer.
No, I think it's just a child soldier training camp. Like I think that's just the vibe.
Ah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe this world does need to be changed. I
Hmm.
mean, like moments like this, and
Charles is
we're gonna,
right.
yeah, we're gonna talk about this a lot next chapter. But like moments like seeing these families, you're a bit like, well, Charles
Hmm.
isn't that wrong.
Yeah,
And I do love those. I do love those consistent reminders this story gives us of like we do agree with Charles on a bunch of things.
yeah. Um,
Oh.
so they rescue McCauleigh, and I don't want to pile on to McCauleigh or anything. Like, I'm glad she's getting rescued and all, but couldn't she have made this choice like 2 months ago and just saved herself the trouble? Am I wrong?
I mean, I guess this way is kind of better
Okay.
because now she's
She
like
gets to spend
it,
2 months in a child training camp.
yeah. Well, now she's stronger for it. She's better for it. She's suffered and she's gotten better. That's what Pale is all about.
Yeah.
No, like the the good side of this. You're right. I'm not saying it was better overall, but like Grayson has kind of like let her go to a degree. Like the thing has been established of
Yeah.
she is free to go and she's just not part of the family
She's
anymore.
exiled from the family. I feel like that was basically what the stakes already were, though, right? I mean, maybe they would have had
No,
to fight Grayson a bit more actively.
yeah. Well, I think that was the thing, right? Is they weren't sure of like if she
Mm,
tried to ditch the ritual last time, they thought maybe Grayson was going to come after her or something. Like, it was quite ambiguous.
mm.
Like, at least this way, there is the sense of like Grayson has sort of officially given
Grayson's
up on
given
her
up. Yeah. Okay. All
because
right.
sorry, we didn't really talk about it, but his logic that he said in his bit was like, so it's like, oh, she will come back in 2 months and she will be broken, so I'll
Yeah.
have the person who does everything I want,
Yeah.
but it's because she'll be dead inside, and like,
She'll never push for
yeah,
anything.
well, and but like again. His issue isn't that she's dead inside. His issue is people notice, and it kind of makes them uncomfortable. So she won't be like as good
Yeah.
because
She won't
she'll
be a
only be
good
able to be
political
used.
marriage or anything like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I'll only be able to use her for some things, so,
Mm,
like, that's not ideal. I just oh, yeah.
mm,
Like, yeah, let Charles at this guy, Like, that's fine.
yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. Just I'm glad McCauleigh is rescued. They bring her back to
Yeah.
Garrick HQ. She can join the the halfway house of Charles refugees.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. She's sitting there with Raquel, and they can hang out. I really, really liked the moment where, so they come back and Kelsey sort of starts, like, mothering McCauleigh, and Verona at first is a bit worried because McCauleigh traditionally has not handled being coddled very well. Um,
Mm,
there was too much of it in her family, and that's what put her off. And but like it totally works. Like it's just that thing where I think like McCauleigh just really, really needs a fucking mom, and also on Kelsey's end, I think Kelsey really needs a daughter who will let her dote on him. So they just kind of find each other, and I think they both just needed this, and it's like this nice moment where Verona's worried turns out to be completely unfounded. McCauleigh needs this as much as Kelsey,
yeah, for
and
sure.
just let them go and be a sort of mother and daughter to each other for a bit. They need it right now.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So then Verona has rescued McCauleigh and finally issues her challenge to Lucy: attend this sword moot that we've been building up all chapter and get an outcome that we're happy with. And again, this is just like the penny dropping moment, right? Of like, oh, this is so perfect.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we did already talk about it a bit before, but it is
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
it's that whole flock of birds with one stone thing where you sort of
Yeah.
like the one issue with this sword moot is kind of what are the results going to be, and so of course Lucy's challenge is like, hey, can you make sure they're pretty
Yes.
good?
Yeah, especially because it's a perfect blend of Lucy's law practice and combat practice and like
Yes,
building up all the fights that she's going to have to deal with like in this chapter. Like she's going to have to maybe fight, Henniger or Mrs. Ferguson or Amasa or something, and it's just like, oh, this is going to be so much fun.
yeah. Like this moot feels specifically designed for Lucy, and of course
Yes, and it
we know it.
is.
It
Yeah.
was like that's sort of
Yeah.
the whole point. Yeah, and I mean, like, what's going to be so fun is again, like Lucy was talking about not wanting to be the enforcer last week because she's not super comfortable with the idea of the soft power she's gathering as a duelist. But like they are fully using it here. Like they get a lot of people on board in this chapter because they're like, well, Anthem's coming.
Mm,
Like that's a lot of how they get the ball rolling. And like I had this in the notes later, but I'm so hyped for Anthem to arrive because it feels like we've been getting good signals about his character development in Can It Found, and I'm just so excited for Anthem to be like standing behind Lucy, and then
mm,
also she's going to have Guillerme, and I just can't wait to see like yeah, we'll talk about it later, but it's just Lucy's role in this is going to be so exciting.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess speaking of, let's get into our next chapter, which is from Lucy's perspective. The start of this chapter is the gang. This is a kind of prep chapter, right? At least until we get to the moot.
Hmm.
The first half of this chapter is the gang preparing to trek to the Orem contest and sword moot. And Sheridan is hanging around, still kind of working on not lying and not yet, getting it.
Yeah. I guess this was also later in my notes, but I'm just going to jump straight forward to here, which is like Sheridan's getting a lot of FaceTime at the moment in the story writers, just like a pain in the ass. And I'm kind of like,
You think she's
is there
gonna
more
get
to it than
killed? What
just?
do you think it is?
Oh, I don't know. Part of me is just like it could just be like 'cause it's always funny. Like it always is funny when Sheridan interjects with her nonsense. But also, I don't know. There's been so much of it. I can't help but think that maybe it is building up to something. I don't know. I can't imagine what,
Mm.
but it's just like there's been a lot of Sheridan
Sheridan becoming a
silliness.
negative.
No, I don't know. Maybe Clutch in the Sable fucking contest somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It just Sheridan's been getting a lot of FaceTime for like 3 or 4 chapters in a row, and it's great for comedy. But I'm also like, I don't know. It's exactly what I feel like I'm still going through with Guillerme, where it's like Guillerme has been a huge presence this arc, and I'm a bit like, is he
Mm.
going somewhere this arc then?
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
like this story has so many characters in it that we don't get to see a lot of them a lot of the time. So when one of them in an arc like this starts to get a lot of FaceTime, I'm like, okay, well, Walbo's presumably including them because he wants to do something with them.
Hey, speaking of Sheridan, I want to call out this moment where Sheridan, talking about Peckersnot, says, "Are we all ignoring the fact that Verona's named a cat?" Sheridan asks, which to me is just like, I wish I could see what Sheridan sees when she looks at Peckersnot. What kind of cat does he look like to her? It's so fucking funny thought.
Or no, I think maybe she thought Gillette was named Peckersnot. She has
Ah,
seen Verona has a cat.
yes, maybe.
Um, Although also I get the vibe that Verona's the sort of person where anyone looks at her and is like, oh, that girl owns a cat. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, so I also wanted to call out the bit. Adoria makes a brief cameo appearance at the start of this chapter because she's gone to get Avery the protein bars. I think it's like literally the opening line of the chapter is she's like, I literally had to go all the way to Montreal to find these, and puts like Avery's protein bars in front of her, and I'm just like, these are the fucking cursed chocolate covered meat flavored protein bars, aren't they? Like, because it makes sense to me that they're so fucking rare because nobody else is sadistic as Avery and eats chocolate coated like meat flavored bars. So you have to go all the way to Montreal to get them.
Mm, yeah. Um, I guess they just haven't caught on like they should yet.
Yeah, yeah, it should.
Mm,
Um, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm going back to Peckersnot and his name, and when Sheridan brings that up, Avery relitigates Snoogie as her pitch for the name.
mm,
And we get that reminder of how terrible it is by Cliff, who's not even a goblin practitioner, being like, "Oh, don't do that to a goblin."
mm.
But it had me thinking, like, part of goblins is their anti-establishment, and like they like to do things ironically. Like we've seen a
Yeah,
lot of that
yeah,
with Liberty.
yeah.
I wonder if in like 20, 50, 100 years, Snoogie could become a good goblin name, just because like if all the goblins are named big terrifying things, then the kind of anti-establishment gross thing to do is just be like a cute little Snoogie.
Yeah.
So Avery's
Interesting.
actually just ahead of her time.
Ahead of the curve with revolutionizing the goblins.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm all for it.
Um, Speaking of little goblins, Guillerme is here, and Sheridan like makes a note of how he's in his like old man guys sitting outside alone, and yeah, Sheridan's like, like it seems pretty shitty that the old guy's outside. Like that's hilariously awful. I get it's magic or whatever, so it's not really. And I read that and I was like, but maybe it kind of is. Like, I think Sheridan might be onto something here.
Mm.
Uh, like Guillerme is terrifying and competent, and I'm sure if you tried to tell him that it was sad and you felt bad for him being out here alone, he'd probably kill you. But
Mm.
it's been pretty consistent since he fell to winter that like he's read as someone who's kind of depressed and like old and alone. And so I don't know, yeah, like I do kind of see Killaway as someone who's so wrapped up in toxic masculinity that like he probably is just really fucking lonely and doesn't want to be out in the cold alone. He just doesn't know how else to like be.
Yeah, what it is kind of sad, a sad image, but like I don't know, is he happy?
See, I think he isn't, but like especially as a winter fae, like it's that the blurring of metaphor and real life. I don't think he's capable of admitting that he
Yeah,
is.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I don't know,
Okay.
like, yeah, just one of those things where as Guillermo's gotten so much focus in this arc, it feels like we've been talking about him a lot. He's worth keeping in mind that like dude's clearly just fucking depressed too. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm.
he's still very competent, he's still very good at what he does, and he's scary, but like he's not in a good place.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're ascribing more human emotions onto him than actually exist for a Winterfell, though. That's what I kind of think.
Yeah, but then again, I feel like Pale has been the story. It's been 3 million words of like learning not to make that mistake. Like, you know, we've got the
Mm.
fucking Turtle Queen out here cooperating and being part of a team. Like, so we could get Guillermo to stop being, I don't know, a lonely nerd.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're gonna see some. We yeah, and I
I
feel like
think
I've
we're
been
going to
saying
see Guillermo in the moot, right? Guillermo's
yes,
there at the
yeah,
moot. I think he's going to come in for some last second clutch moment, like, Lucy's fighting Grayson, and Guillermo's like, but if I do this, and then Grayson trips
yeah.
over and Lucy kills. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, the mood is really the first thing because yeah, we've been talking about this since Guillermo became a big presence at the start of the arc. It's sort of like, is he leading up to something? The moot's the first thing where I'm like, that could be it.
Mm,
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if some of this stuff does come to a head for him at the moot, especially because he talked about sacrificing himself in the Alabaster trial, and Lucy was like, no, 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 we don't do that here.
mm,
There's no way he won't try and pull that shit at the moot.
mm. Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Um, so yeah, Kelsey signs up to come along. Avery is fretting and making busy work for herself and kind of avoiding her thoughts.
Yeah. And I do like you can just feel the stressed energy like oozing from Avery. Like she's very upfront about. Like I love the bit. She just like is blatantly just finding busy work to keep herself distracted. Like she notices Verona's bag is messy, so she just fucking empties it on the table and starts sorting it for her.
Mm,
And then she's like, "Oh, decks of like runes. You let me sort those." And she just like, which is like, I remember being stressed as a teenager and fucking resorting my Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So it's just like exactly the same energy.
mm, yeah, yeah. It's definitely like doing chores to avoid, your obsessive thoughts mindset.
Yeah. Well, it's like that when you have a big assignment due, but you can't actually work on it right now. So you just
Mm,
like you're trying to
mm,
distract yourself.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like exactly I mean, that's what essentially, literally what it is. Yeah, I don't. I guess because like the Avery being stressed was a thing in her chapter last week, and it was noted a lot in the Verona chapter, and now in this Lucy one, it really does come to a head. But it's like so it's been there for all three, but this is really, I think this chapter lays it on the thickest, where it's just like, okay, if you had any doubts, Avery's on the brink.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure.
Yeah, and yeah, we already talked about Sheridan and her whole presence.
Mm,
I just, I love the bit where she tells Verona, she's like, oh, I'm just thinking I'll find like a one size fits all solution to losering and go from there.
mm.
And you can just tell Verona's like, that's not gonna work. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like, I almost want an interlude. Like, we'll do a chapter of the Aurum thing, we'll do a chapter of the Moot, and then let's just have an interlude, which is just Sheridan at the Garrick HQ.
Yeah. What it's hard to get a good read on Sheridan, right? Like she's still doing a lot of needling, and like in my head I'm kind of like, well, she's probably not going to be able to be a practitioner until she, I don't know, like matures or chills a bit. But then you could probably say the same thing about Verona sometimes, and she's a bloody natural. So what the
Yeah,
fuck do I know?
yeah, but Verona had all that practice at like just full on lying,
Mm,
whereas I think Sheridan relies a lot more on sarcasm, which is like
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
subtle but important difference.
yeah. Fair.
So we need Sheridan to just start full on lying first.
Okay, yeah,
Get her,
that'll do it.
awaken her with that snowdrop rule of discourse.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like
that's fair.
patch that into the awakening ritual.
She can only speak in sarcasm. That's her
Yeah,
rule of discourse.
I mean, honestly, like that, I think it would be easier for her to adjust to that.
So yeah, the group rolls out. They get a RV from Ed the City Mage and head off on their fun little road trip.
Yeah, I love this because I was like, "Do you reckon this is Ed?" And then I had sort of the same reaction as Avery, where he leaves, and then they're like, "That's Ed," and Avery's like, "Wait, that's Ed?" Like,
Yeah,
oh shit! Like I should have done something. Like it's just
it,
it.
the,
We've been hearing about this dude since like arc 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And he finally fucking
Famous
makes an
egg.
appearance.
Yeah, it's so funny to me as well that in the text he's literally just like the only physical description he gets is that he's a man. Like that's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing about him. So Lucy clearly pays so little attention to him.
Yeah. As this dinner is bringing up the same thing that I have in my notes in the chat, which is I want to learn about his god parasite. That was a big thing fucking 20 arcs ago. Is the god parasite going okay?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. It's yeah, I did enjoy it. And like the vibe that he's just kind of detached because he did a big pilgrimage to the spirit world. Like, that's fun. This dude seems interesting as hell. Bring him
Mm.
back.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure he'll come back eventually. Now that we could theoretically recognize him. I mean, not
So I
us,
also
but
I do think it is really funny because we heard that he did really want to talk to the Kenneteers. It was like 2 or 3 weeks
mm,
ago where it was like
yeah,
somebody was like, "Hey, you made a provincial spirit and made it the alabaster. Like,
yeah,
of course, the fucking city mage wants to talk to you."
yeah. I
And
mean, not
apparently
that
that
much
takes
though.
yeah, apparently that takes the form of him tossing keys and fucking off.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a conversation to Ed's mind. So yeah, they get on their way, and after a while, they have to stop for petrol. And Jude helps trick them into being open with each other. Not trick them, asks them kindly into being open with each other.
yeah. Jude completes his arc as the male Avery by being the one
Yeah,
who's like,
yeah.
"Hey guys, let's talk about our feelings." Like when Avery isn't in the place to be the Avery because she's the one with the feelings, you
Mm,
need backup Avery to come in and kickstart the process.
mm, yeah, yeah. But it's good vibes. I do like this time zone thing that Jude brings up, which was a cool idea, but as
A
soon as I
day
read
late.
it, he was like, "Wait, go back in time to Australia. That's definitely not how. Like
Yeah.
we ring in the new year, right?"
Yeah, I think that that definitely. I feel like that bit would have worked really well for like us as
Yeah,
Australians because you read it and you're like, no, 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 we're a day before, Jude. That's not
yeah,
gonna.
yeah,
No, he's got there. He's got
yeah, yeah. So that was good times.
there. Yeah, and I guess to touch on Avery here because like she finally sort of opens up, and I thought it was interesting because she compares it to like Verona's sort of arc 10 breakdown where she had to go away with her mom, and Lucy's kind of arc 14 breakdown where she realized there was no justice in the world. And I guess I had no idea that Avery thought this was anywhere near that serious for her, but
Mm,
I really enjoyed from the story's angle that like the angle this took of Avery kind of being really blocked on this because she sort of felt like she couldn't complain because her complaints are all sort of taking the form of things are going kind of too well right now and I don't want to lose it, which is like a hard thing to complain about when the people around you have actual problems, I guess, is almost the vibe. Like, Lucy's talking about how she really misses her family
mm,
and it's like, it's sort of hard to be the person who's like, man, I'm losing my mind because I'm worried I'm about to like lose my family, like
mm,
you already have,
mm,
you can't wait. So it kind of makes sense to me that this was an issue that Avery really has been like bottling up and letting boil inside. And
mm.
like, yeah. Yeah. And again, a testament to how much the Kenneteers are coming together. The other two are just able to be like, oh no, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like this is Avery kind of boiling over. Like I was trying to think, like, is there something to this? And I really just think there isn't. Like
yeah.
Avery is just having a rough time.
Yeah, but yeah, it is like an extremely understandable sort of meltdown. Like, yeah, it's that sort of thing where you would struggle to articulate it because it's one of those problems that you probably like you don't want to complain about it because it's like presumably it's affecting everyone else around you the same, if not more. So
Mm,
like you don't want to be the one who's breaking down because like yeah, Lucy is separated from her family, Verona's separated from her domain. Avery's technically the one who's like out in her element, her family is the one that's here. Like, how is she the one that's falling apart? Of course, she kind of wasn't speaking up about this when she's usually the one who just will say what's on her mind.
mm, yeah, yeah. Sweet. It's a sweet moment of connection before they head into this challenge.
Yeah, and I really do like Lucy and Verona being able to be the one, especially Lucy being able to be the one who's like, "Hey, look, even if we don't win, like we've made a difference." Because I think the fandom's been saying that for a while, but it's not really nice to hear the Kenneteers be
Yeah,
like,
be
even if
on
we
that.
like lose tomorrow, we've McCauleigh, Raquel, like so many others, Anthem. Like we've made a difference, and that's not going to entirely go away.
Mm.
And I think Avery kind of needed to hear that, and I think Lucy and Verona probably needed to say it. Like it's an important point to take in. It's
Mm.
like they're doing good even if they don't win.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Also, I really wanted to bring this up. As Lucy is thinking about how overwhelming all the stuff before them is, she's thinking, well, we've got 3 more judges to beat, and we've got to deal with Marisica on the way.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Marisica finally makes a fucking appearance
Yeah.
in the
They're
list of people
planning
they
to
are.
deal with Marcy. Holy shit. Here we go.
Oh, I was like, it's. I think it's the first time she's actually sort of been thought about in that way, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll see what their thinking is there, but I'm just like, at least she's not falling through the cracks anymore.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, the gang is pepped up and ready to go. Lucy and Jude head into the lion's den. Charles is there, immediately tries to gainsay, but Lucy is saved by her BFFs and Deb and an old man Musser.
This whole sequence is like just so funny, especially opening with like Anne and Deb, because it's
Yeah.
like it's always funny seeing pain in the ass characters like this pointed at people you don't like. Like watching Anne and Deb team up to annoy the shit out of Charles is just so good.
Yeah, was Anne and Deb specifically picked because they have that HOA experience vibe, so they can kind of come in and be the Karens weaponized against Charles here? Like, were they intentionally picked as the first people to arrive?
No, I think that's just good luck. That's
It
that's
was
just karma.
pretty funny.
Karma on
Um,
Lucy's side.
yeah,
Um,
I also really like how the gainsaying that Charles lays at Lucy's feet is so minor. It's like you said I think blah, but you didn't actually really think that. And Lucy's response is, well, I had
are
to
you
think it
serious?
for me to say it, right? Charles is like, no, 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 but you didn't really think it. And it's just like it's like the shittiest little, like it's so clearly a nothing burger.
Yeah, but like again, this is like because that was Charles's whole plan with the gainsayings, right? Like
Mm,
it seemed like he was intentionally trying to weaken the rigidity of this sort of thing. And this went right back to arc 14. When he started pulling this shit, it was like, oh, it seems he wants to make gainsaying and stuff weaker, and that obviously tracks for his whole forswearing bad policy.
mm,
So like you're as much as I'm like it's funny that it doesn't work here because it seems like a victory. I can't help but tinfoil and think, well, yeah, we're trying to figure out what Charles is cooking in the background, and like this has been a part of his platform from day one is intentionally continuing to weaken, and like they're here trying to form a big law moot and saying, oh, what we decide here should be law, and everyone has to do it. And
mm,
Charles is here reminding us that he's been in very intentionally weakening the most fundamental parts of that.
mm.
So like, I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
you can
Okay,
tinfoil
fair enough.
that this is actually Charles. Like
He's
this is a win for
intentionally picking a
Charles.
shitty one, but still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just like I'm on the lookout for Charles pulling shit, and I'm just seeing this, and I'm like, this could be Charles. Like getting them to continue to weaken gainsaying is continuing to weaken word of law, which might come in handy for the
Mm,
sword moot results.
yeah. Um, is this Moss's dad? Like, we know it's
I
either
think
dad or
so.
uncle, right? Like, that's what Lucy seems to think. Do we have confirmation that it's Moss's dad, or we're not sure?
No, I mean Charles specifies Abraham Jr. in a bit.
Mm,
But then I suppose you would have to specify that if this was the uncle, because then he would be Abraham Senior's brother, and so it would
mm,
still need to clarify who you're talking about.
mm.
I'd like to think it's the dad
Yeah.
because I think it's funny that he's having to do this work again
I
after
think so too.
retiring.
I think that would be really fun, but I'm unsure. I was kind of like mulling it over and trying to see if we got concrete
Yeah,
confirmation, but
I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what he's like next chapter. Has he taken on the Musa spirit now? Like, is he the new actual patriarch again?
mm,
There's a lot of stuff to explore with the Moss Stairway because we skipped over the Moss chapter. That was the one we didn't see.
mm,
I also I do. It's a extremely fun moment when like Lucy kind of gets saved here by Mossa. Like
mm,
Charles doesn't properly back off until Mossa adds his family's weight to to this as like, no, we're done with this bullshit at the game saying it's like I'm with Anne, Deb, and Lucy and the only boys on this. And because like Lucy makes eye contact with Charles as it happens, it's sort of like the master takes her side and she's sort of looking at him and it's like, hey man, if you want to push back against him,
Go for it. Yeah.
you know what, fucking gainsay me, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and this is what's going to be so fucking fun about this moot is these like this shifting alliance landscape. It's going to be arc 17 sort of on steroids because it's like the Kennedy, Lucy's going to be against like the Hennigers and the Sonjates. We're pretty confident about that. They're going to bring some bullshit rules, and Charles is going to agree with her on most of that. You think like he hates them and a lot of like on half the policies, Lucy's going to be on Charles's side, and on the other half, she's going to be against him. So that's going to be like really fun. Is like watching, yeah, the Hennigers propose something, and Lucy and Charles kind of team up to defeat them. But then, the Negateers are going to suggest something else. And so then the Lucy will be like, okay, Hennigers, that's fucked. Let's team up. Like, that's what's going to be
Mm,
so fun about this mood is Lucy's going to be fucking switching sides all over the place. And I can't wait.
yeah. Yeah. It's really exciting stuff. Yeah, I guess we're getting into it. Like, we start with them kind of defining that Charles has to oversee this and he can't just do some bullshit on them because he's there to fill in the gaps. I'll read out the quote. You may arbitrate on nuance and fill in the gaps. You may act when others don't, and you may mediate as we order you to mediate, but without undue interference. But it's ultimately our patterns that hold sway. So, a group of practitioners like this can not let him pull shit because
Yeah.
he's just meant to mediate on uncertainty. And if they're all unified, there's no uncertainty.
I feel like this is the sort of practitioner equivalent of like yelling at a policeman, like, I pay your salary. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
but like, I kind of agree with them on this one.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
But yeah, I do love the idea of like kind of really trying because that is Charles's weakness is he's limited to what his role can do. We saw that with Percival. He couldn't kill Percival, even though he was just like a little acorn dipshit.
Mm,
So this is like continuing to hammer in that weakness of like, no, we can really call on the shit that your role has to do.
mm,
I also with the ending to this is the part where then like Deb sort of says, it's our conventions and connections that lay the framework, and Anne steps in and helps, and then Abraham Musser or senior or whatever finishes off with like, and it's our establishment. And then Stein quickly jumps in and like breaks the rule of three with the fourth one. He's like, yeah, and we're saying bullshit. And then like Anne finishes it and is clearly unimpressed. But like I really enjoyed the joke of the Oni practitioner being the one
yeah.
who fucked up the rule of three. Like, I remember the first thing we learned about these boys, or the first time we saw them in action, one of them was like doing his throwing knife technique, and he threw like a fourth one, and it caught all the practitioners off guard because they thought he'd stop at three. And I think it was like Estrella even yelled at him. She was like, "Stop at three, like a not like a respectable fucking practitioner." Um,
Yep.
and so yeah, like I love that sort of continuing in the background.
Yeah, it was a very fun little beat for sure.
Um, it's actually sorry, it's interesting, as Rook has seemingly just started tutoring some of the Negateers. It's interesting that these boys have come back into the fore. Like,
Mm,
I wonder if that's something that will matter.
yeah,
Um,
it's a very good question.
yeah, like even just in the context of the moot, if the Negateers have picked up some Oni tricks.
Mm, yeah, yeah, really interesting. We'll have to see.
Um, Also, yeah, this is where Guillermo makes his reappearance. And I just had to call out the line where he appears because, like, Lucy's thinking that everyone's watching her. And she thinks to herself, position,
Mm.
posture. And then, as if to echo the thought, Guillermo made his appearance, walking over to stand by Lucy's side. Like, I love this story. Like, that's such a powerful moment. That's so good.
Yeah, it is good, isn't it? Yeah. Um, so yeah, Charles is setting the stage. Lucy has a chat with Miss, but things get more tense than we expected for a chat with Miss.
Yeah. Yeah, she's surprised. Her coldness caught me off guard, that's for
Yes,
sure.
for sure. Um,
Oh,
t- to me, I guess we'll get to what she's upset about. The thing that really jumped out to me about it is like it's an angle that I hadn't necessarily considered on the Alabaster situation, which is that
yeah.
like the trio murdered an other, like judicially, a judicial kind of killing, right? Which is very. I guess I hadn't really. I like we saw it as an escalation in general, but there's also this vibe of it being an escalation in terms of their ability as practitioners to decide whether an other should live or die, especially an immortal other. Like, it's easy to see why Miss sees that as an offensive escalation.
Well, especially as somebody else, like the thing that really jumped out to me was Miss was always the like agile underdog,
Mm,
and she took on this role as like Kenneth found. So now she is another ageless other with a domain who's going to be there forever. So it's
mm,
like the connection between her and the Alabaster, or even her and the Bjorgman, are sort of there. And I wouldn't have made that connection, but like when she started talking, I was like, oh yeah, like of course, like she has to be sitting there, like she's got her little forest now, to use her metaphor, and she has to stay there forever and ever. And so all these things kind of affect her. And like she can look at someone like the Alabaster and think, well, how do I know that's not me in 3,000 years? Like I have to be able to think about in 3,000 years from now, I might be as behind the times as the Alabaster or whatever. Like that would be kind of terrifying. She's now stuck here. This Kenneth found is kind of her domain, and that like is what it is.
mm,
And she has to be thinking about, oh, what does the world around me look like? Yeah, 10,000 years from now.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. The immortality really does add another angle to it, right? Because
Yeah,
Lucy is fighting for her lifetime, but it makes it very easy to understand the people like Rook's perspective. Like, if this one seems like it's not going to work, I would rather fail and try again eventually than make a concession that will affect me permanently. You know, like that is a fair
yeah.
trade-off to not want to make.
Yeah, and because I mean, like Miss becoming Kenneth Found was talked about as a big sacrifice because she always wanted to not have a role. And like that was sort of a big thing when she first did it, and we talked about it back then. But I guess this is the first time we're really getting a chance to check in with how that is sitting with her. And I mean, the answer is not great right now because things are a fucking mess.
Mm,
And also, like, yeah, I guess I hadn't really considered. I think we talked about it a little bit, but it really hit me, I guess, how much it's like. I mean, she's in permanent like COVID isolation at this point, right? Like she used to be someone who traveled a lot, and I'd never fully appreciated how much she's very much stuck in Kenneth Found now forever. Like it's not just a 2 week fucking lockdown. Like I guess I'd never considered, yeah, that immortality angle that you brought up. Like she is now in lockdown, ideally forever, because otherwise she dies.
yeah.
Like that's so intense, and I guess yeah, we talked about the sacrifice, but I really felt it more in this first conversation with her that we've really had since she did it.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't like it. It's funny because it's like she doesn't want to be like an institution like the Alabaster, but also now she is. So it's like she's like inherently aware of the problems they face, and she's watching the Kenneteers dismantle them as she's unwillingly become one. Um, I guess I'd be pissy too.
Mm, yeah. Fair enough, I suppose. Yeah.
Um, it's also like it's fun for Lucy because she makes a note of how fucking off guard this like argument. Like she's here ready to fight Hennigers and stuff, and she wasn't expecting to have Miss kind of be here being like, I'm not really happy with how things are going, to be honest. It's just because like they're holding this distinctly not very Kenneth Found sword moot. Like they're bringing all the violence practitioners and sticking them in the middle of Kenneth Found,
Mm,
and it's also like Lucy is the very not Kenneth Found compatible practitioner. So again, you can kind of see from Mrs. side a bit. It's like, okay, so we've brought the girl who doesn't really get me in my area, and she's bringing all the most violent people and telling me to gather them in the middle of town. Like,
yeah.
um, yeah, like Lucy. It's just so funny to me that it is Lucy kind of alone here in terms of the Kenneteers as the one talking to Miss about this because she's the one who they just see eye to eye the least on this sort of thing.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Like, although
I feel you.
that all said, I was like that did make me think as well. Kenna Found is such a good place to host this sort of sword moot because it's kind of like
It's the
you're creating a
least
little
combative kind of place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like we are setting up a little combat arena inside of it. Like we're letting Charles set up his temporary home in the middle, but yeah, it's like setting up a little violence dome, a little thunderdome in this non-violent place, and that has to. I do think that is really valuable imagery for what this sword moot is meant to be, which is like it's fighting because it's combat practitioners and you're all fucking hair triggers with swords and shit. But like this is a law moot, like with a
Mm,
capital L first and foremost.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. God, I'm just so excited for this moot.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
um,
Oh, sorry. I almost forgot to call out this. This might be my new favorite line in the whole story, which
mm,
is the bit where Miss tells Lucy, "You killed the alabaster," and Lucy says she killed herself, and Miss
yeah.
responds, "She killed herself at your hand unwillingly." That's
Good way to
such a
describe it.
good clarification that doesn't technically gainsay her.
Yeah,
And I love that, like, even Lucy just sort of nods to that. She's like, "Yeah, I guess that's a fair summary of what happened. She killed herself through me, against her own will." Like, yeah,
yeah.
I
It's
love
it's a bit silly, but yeah.
it. But,
Um,
that's not that different. Like, that's sort of Miss forming Kenneth Found, right? Like,
yeah,
Miss did it, but she kind of had to be talked into it. The page had to show up and give her a wink to make her go.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, they've got the arena prepped, everyone's arriving, and Lucy enters combat mode after a quick kind thought, the last one she has to spare. I love how immediately the bickering starts. It just like sets the tone so perfectly. Like Lucy's all right, okay, let's start. And Anne's like, you're running this meeting? I don't think so. It's just like such a perfect lead into what the vibe of this is going to be like. I'm so happy.
Yeah, but it was also that thing where I'm like, oh, can we, if next chapter is another Lucy chapter with the sword mode, or whenever the next Lucy chapter with the sword mode is, I'm like, can we skip to the part where they've already decided who's running the meeting? Because I can't, I can't listen to this argument.
Yeah.
Like, Anne and Deb are just so frustrating.
Yeah, it's very good. Um, so yeah, we already talked about this. Like, I'm really excited for the moot. We don't have a good picture of the Aurum challenge, so I'm struggling to kind of picture what it's going to look like. So I'm just like obsessing over what the moot's going to be like, and
Yeah.
I'm very keen for it.
Yeah, it's sort of like what we talked about earlier. I think this is great because the Aurum challenge is vague, and we think it might actually just kind of go quite well because Ryan seems there's something going on with Ryan that means it's not going to kind of be what we expect. So I love that we like. Yeah, I'm 100% more hyped for the moot than it's like, oh, Aurum shit, cool, that's fine, I guess. But like, this is the real shit, and like this is honestly, at this, pending learning more about what's going on with the Aurum, this moot feels more like Pale than the Aurum
Mm,
challenge almost does.
mm.
Like this is so
Yeah,
much of what
interesting.
Pale's been talking about. Like Lucy gathering all the combat mages together to have a law moot to like ride into temporary law. How we're going to be better, try to be better people now, or whatever. Like that's just so Pale.
Yeah,
Like this is why it's sort of not the sideshow in my head at least anymore, but has become kind of the main show because it's Verona has so fucking overshot the moon that it's just like, oh, this is like incredibly on brand Kenneteer stuff.
yeah, 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 yeah. Definitely. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's very, very on brand for the Kennetiers and for Pale as a story, isn't it? Especially for
Yeah.
Lucy. That's why it's so. Maybe that's why I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, this like yeah, this like if this ends up being 2 to 3 chapters of just like Lucy back to back sort of stuff, that would just make sense to me because it's like this. It's such a big moment for her, and every as you said, like you brought up that this merges her law stuff with her trifold duelist, and like
Mm,
that's why it feels like a sort of a big culmination in the Lucy arc.
mm, yeah, yeah,
Um, sorry, I just thought to myself, this is a bit of an aside. It's not in the notes, but so they're setting this up in the middle of Kenneth Found, right?
yes.
Like that's not the arena, is it? That this is a separate spot.
Well, I feel like it's meant to be kind of the Kenneth Found analogy to the arena, isn't it?
No, because there's the burnt remains of the arena. This is where Charles. It's the equivalent of where Charles has his throne and Kenneth below, which is different to the arena, I think.
Right.
So
Okay.
okay. Damn it. I was hoping it was actually on the same side as the arena, and I was like, fucking Carmine Contest 2.0, but
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where our chapter wraps up.
Yeah. Um, again, I'm just so hyped. Like,
Yeah.
I can't wait to see these shifting alliances in the sword moot and Anthem's going to be there, and I can't wait to actually get to see firsthand what his character development has been like, because it's seemingly, am I cautiously optimistic that it's going well? And he's Lucy's
Yeah.
future stepdad, so
Yep.
like
Yeah,
it's
for
important
sure.
we see him doing well in person.
Yeah.
And then obviously like Guillermo, like yeah.
Yeah.
My only side note, with as all the Orem stuff keeps happening, and I had this thought with you in mind. Where's Florin at? I really thought Florin would have been called in for that favor by now by Avery, and like maybe while the Orem plan's still vague, there's still a chance. But he seemed perfect to bring in for the Orem part.
Well, Florin has been recruited for Avery's army, as I'm easily impressed commented in a Reddit comment. I put out this comment for our part where we pull out predictions and comments. Actually, no, this was in our pale prediction sheet. Actually, was I'm easily impressed was predicting that Florin is going to be instrumental, or at least a part of Avery's army against the Aurum, which I think will be very fun because I want more Florin, and I think Florin has the right vibes to be a part of the Aurum contest.
Yeah, that's what my first instinct was, that he as a person is just classic Orem. Fuck, what if he's the candidate they're going to pitch for the new Orem? That would be a lot.
Holy shit, that would be so good.
uh,
Oh, damn, that's awesome.
I'd have reservations, but
Yeah.
not as many as I should, if I'm being
Now
honest.
that's a prediction, Elliot. That's a prediction.
That's a bold and specific prediction. Put it in Malia's sheet. Yeah, I don't know. Like I guess it's funny because like Beligtal is having a thought that I'd put in our notes too, which is like maybe Florin is better suited for the Sable. And I just, am I the only one who I try to think about what the Sable's domain and like role is, and I just kind of draw a lot of blanks. Like the Sable is the one I just feel like I still don't
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And considering, the Sable is the judge whose realm is the Pale, like that has to be intentional. Like it's all gonna fucking come together, right? Like
Mm,
because it's just, yeah, the Sable. I'm just like, I don't get you, man. Like on a personal and professional level, I don't. Yeah,
mm.
like if it's all about change and tarot deathy change stuff, does Florin fit in with that? I mean, just where does puppeteering come into it? How are the Kenneteers going to let him ethically puppeteer? Because that was his thing, right? Florin's thing was
Yeah.
most of the time he doesn't actually do his practice. That's the big guns when he pulls it out. And I kind of want to see the Kenneteers call those big guns out. I just don't know how they do that in a way that doesn't feel shitty.
Yeah. Good question. I don't know. Not
Anyway,
sure.
yeah. I mean, yeah, canning our chickens before they hatch here. Let's deal with the Aurum, and then we can worry about understanding the Sable, I guess. There's,
Hmm.
one at a time.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of predictions, I put out the prediction that I was impressed left in our
Yeah.
Pale Predictor sheet. Do you have a prediction or a comment that you want to pull out?
Yeah, I pulled out a comment from the 21.11 Reddit thread from WonderBitch26, who was focusing on that quote that we talked about before, which is the one where it was like you killed the alabaster, or at least she died at her own hands, or she killed herself at your hands unwillingly. And WonderBitch26 kind of called out the hypocrisy from Miss there a bit, of like, Miss just stood there and watched the Carmine die. Like, if we're
Mm,
talking, if we're sort of blaming people for Judge's deaths, Miss is throwing an awful lot of stones from a bit of a glass house at the moment,
mm,
in her moodiness.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a good call out. This whole story started from Miss doing kind of the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, are we also running a discussion question last week, Elliot? Which was based off of Sheridan's loser practice. It was picking an insult and making a practice based on it. And we got a lot of answers to this one. This was a very
Yeah,
engaged with question. A lot of answers that I really, really liked as well.
yeah. Should we just let's just dive into it because there's a
Yeah.
bunch here to talk about.
I really liked Captain Rhino's answer, which was a coward, a karmic practice about turning down opportunities in exchange for the ability to escape obligations. So it was one of like, oh, I might be obligated to join this fight against whatever, but because I'm a coward, I can spend some of my coward power to avoid that.
Yeah.
Which was a really cool idea, and it felt like an extension of the magic path coin that
Yes.
Avery can get, like a way to back out of things to kind of get energy to back out of things, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I I hate this idea from the perspective of I think in real life, if I had access to this button, I would keep pushing it.
Yeah.
Like it would be so easy to become a coward who
Yeah,
just
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
lives at
For
home.
sure.
Like, because it's like it's such a positive feedback loop of like you miss out on good things, so you can miss out on bad things, but then you're someone who's not involved, and before you know it, you're a fucking hermit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it
Uh,
was really good.
I really liked Sintile brought up a mupp being a muppet, which is
Mm.
basically like a bit of a hybrid of dole and hosting practices where you intentionally like let another pilot you for a bit. Like that did feel right for the word muppet. And I actually
Yes,
think
it's very silly to imagine what it would look like.
yeah, I think Shin 7 had a similar one. They had dim witted, and it was kind of very similar, like a subfield of hosting where you carve bits
Yes.
out of yourself and let somebody else like run the show for a bit.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Good vibes. I really liked Beard of Valor. Beard of Valor did like a bunch of
Yeah.
answers.
But
But
I think Beard of Valor thought they could sneak through because each of them was a separate
a
comment.
different
So
comment, yeah, trying to
like
trick us into thinking that they were
yeah.
all different. No, there were a lot of really good ones in here. I really liked Hooligan, which was kind of a practitioner-y, goblin-y vibe, like going
Yeah.
against the status quo. I also really liked Narcissist, like someone aware who kind of becomes the main character of
Yeah.
stories, which is just kind of really cool. Like, because things have been about them, they kind of warp things to be more about them and become the
Yeah.
center of the universe,
That
which is
person
just a
who
cool
thinks
idea.
that person who thinks everything's about them, but
Yeah.
it's an aware person where it becomes kind of a bit true.
Yes, which is
Um
such a cool idea for an aware
Yeah,
one.
I want to see that character in
Yeah,
Plex. That
yeah, yeah,
make that person the first POV in Plex
yeah.
because they're the main character. I really liked Beard of Valor's one that was a basic, which
Mm,
is somebody who locks themselves into very stereotypical sort of vibes to like gain extra power from embracing like the pattern reinforcement systems in the Otherverse. So you kind of lock yourself in as a basic, and it means you can only do really common stereotypical things, and so you're limited, but you also get more power doing them.
mm,
Um, which I thought was a really cool combination of the mechanics of the Otherverse, and also really suits the accusation of calling someone basic.
yeah. Yeah, it's a really good uh a good answer to the discussion question. I was
Yeah.
trying to think of a description for what this thing is, but it doesn't exist. So yeah,
um, I liked Beleg Tal's Sacrus. They Beleg Tal
yes,
was really nice, and it tried to include a pronunciation guide, but it assumed that I can read good even from the pronunciation guides.
yeah. So this is like a French or Quebecois, insult, I guess.
Yeah, so my understanding is sacras are like a group of swear words and that sort of thing, which is like, but
Right.
it's taken from like Catholic words. So basically, they've taken the French versions of a bunch of like Catholic terms for things and kind of just started using them as profanity.
Mm,
So basically, like Beleg is suggesting that like just sort of making this a practice, like taking objects of ritual from Catholic or whatever ceremonies,
mm,
like taking things of religious or ritualistic importance and kind of turning them into profane, evil items.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, using this practice of seemingly converting. I think honestly, it took me a bit to try and wrap my head around what Beleg had written, but I think that's what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. We got a few others. We got RL Raider gave us an explanation of weebs, which we kind of already saw in Liberty's Goblin transformation. So I think we already kind of know what that looks like.
Oh,
Crossed with the
I
Oni
thought you were going to say the
practitioners.
only
Yes, yes.
the only practitioners are weebs,
The Oni
100%.
practitioners crossed with Liberty's costume transformations, I think, is what a weeb practitioner would look like.
Sorry, but I do want to quote RL Raider's actual answer, which was weebs are war mages with a divine flair because they have the power of God and anime on their side.
That's good. um, Knowledge Nomad gave us Naga around nagging spirits to change to
Yeah.
gently cause long-term changes, which I think is fun.
Yeah, I like the again. This was another one that I thought added like or used the mechanics of the other verse in a really cool way. Like because like the focus was on getting old spirits and sort of slowly, yeah, nagging them into changing what their pattern is. To suit like a return. And they talked about it being a generational practice. Like you get a really old, really well reinforced pattern, and just sort of over 50 years, sort of nag it into being what you want it to be. Like
Mm,
that's such a fun idea.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I also wanted to call out Hobo Demon's Knobhead one, which they were pitching as basically like the chiropractic equivalent of a spirit surgeon. So like if you can't afford an actual spirit surgeon, a knobhead will basically open you up and just kind of twist a bunch of shit around so that it feels better for a little bit.
Mm,
But obviously, you'll need to keep going back and seeing them because all they've done is temporarily relieve pressure, which I'm very anti chiropractors as a rule, so I like this answer as an excuse to dunk on chiropractors.
mm.
So definitely getting a lot of points from me on this one.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was all of them. Were there any others that we missed? I
No,
think we
I
talked
tried to
about all
do
of them.
my own for this one. I wanted to do like a bunch of Aussie insults,
Yeah, yeah.
but it turns out it's really hard because all of our insults are like not words, like. Like when you get like a knobhead or something like that means something else that you can draw from. Whereas like all the Australian insults I could think of like drongo and gronk and numpty.
Mm, mm.
What are those? Like,
Yeah, they're just kind of fun sounds. They're more ogre
yeah,
magi practices than anything.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone for leaving your discussion question answers this week. We've got a new discussion question, which I think will be a really fun one. Similar to the way that the Garricks have their convenience store, or Verona, I guess, has her unused bookstore. The discussion question this week is: what type of small and benign, or mostly benign, business would you run for practitioners? So it's not a fully magical business like Clem or things like that, but a mostly benign business.
Yeah, like what supplies are you giving to practitioners to help with their practice that isn't necessarily magical? I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah, exactly right.
Um, yeah. So I wanted to say because somebody called it out in the chat earlier, but calling Verona's bookstore the unused bookstore
It's
is
good. I
really
was
good.
pretty proud of
That
it when I thought of it.
yeah yeah like I love that name, and I'm gonna start taking that up. That's great.
Um, but yeah, so you can leave your answers to that discussion question in the discussion thread, which you can find linked in the show notes down below.
Yes, in the like show notes, you'll also find like links to our Twitter and other socials. Um, Depending on how the next few weeks plan out, those other socials might be more important than Twitter, but that's currently still the primary one.
Yeah, we have not set up a Mastodon or I guess a Tumblr yet, but maybe.
Yeah.
If you
Also,
do want to,
I'm always just getting my head around Twitter. Like, why are we?
yeah, yeah,
s-
you're really coming in right at the end, aren't you, Elliot?
Yeah, I feel like I started using Twitter like 6 months ago. Like, I'm just such a death knell for fucking social media. Once I'm on a social media network,
Yep,
it's
it's
fucking done.
everyone's like, all right, time to move on.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you want to make sure you're across whatever social media we go to, and Twitter has a critical server fault and goes down forever, you can stay in touch with us on the website at doofmedia.com. You can find out all of our up-to-date socials, and all of the other great shows on the Doof Media Network are there as well.
Yeah. You know where you know where we're actually going to be if Twitter goes down.
Mm,
I'm going to exclusively. I'm going to say Power Reflections social media presence is going to move exclusively to the like Splatoon 3
yeah, yeah,
meme thing, like the Miiverse
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Miiverse
successor.
replacement. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Obviously, our
we'll put.
Discord is also one of our major social
No,
media
I'm shutting that
platforms.
down. We're
Oh, I
going
see.
all in
Okay,
on
okay, okay.
Splatoon.
Yeah. If you want to join our Discord, by the way, you can go to doofmedia.com/Discord, and that's where you can find out about our live recordings too.
Yes, and we don't forget we have a Patreon, patreon.com
Mm-hmm.
forward slash doof media. That is what is funding, the microphones that you're listening to,
This
all
very
the
microphone.
yes, all packed up two stuff we're currently planning. Like we really do use that money to make the show better.
Yeah. And while you're on Patreon, make sure you head over to Warbo's Patreon as well at patreon.com/Warbo, because of course he is only able to create these cool stories because folks like you support him. So please do that. Otherwise, I'll be
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, and you got to pay him quick before we change the Aurum and the markets tank
Oh yeah,
and all that
exactly,
jazz.
exactly right. Yeah. Um, Well, thanks for joining us, folks, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.